It's always advisable when you're doing any power downs in a business to also have IT on site to make sure everything turns back on.
Right.
The government have a massive part to play, especially putting pressure on the national grid, injecting more money into upgrades across the country because it is becoming quite a stumbling block for installers and consumers alike.
Hello and welcome to Positive Energy, powered by the Eco Experts. I'm your host, Chris Hambling, and I'm joined by my co-host, Roland Ellison, the editor of the Eco Experts.
Hello.
So today we're joined by Porrick Foodie of Geo Green Power. Porrick, thanks so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So why should a business consider getting a solar panel installed?
There's many reasons you should consider getting solar panels installed. The main one is reducing your energy bills, and quite significantly by up to 20 to 30, even 50% in some cases, depending on your energy usage and the size of your roof. There's also then, you've got the added aspect that you're not relying on an energy supply that can also be liable to fluctuations. As we've seen recently with the war in Ukraine, price of gas has gone up, which obviously impacted wholesale electricity as well. It's meant that the payback has become a lot quicker for consumers and large businesses.
I suppose, what should a business look out for when they're considering getting a solar panel installed? Like, how do they go about choosing an installer, essentially?
There's many things to look at. Where I work, one of the things that we actually pride ourselves on is warranties. So we only install tier 1 panels. The tier 1 is the Rolls Royce of panels. So therefore, that means it's on a bankability scale, which means that the company's been going for X amount of years, has a certain turnover, but then also is producing in large volumes so that you can actually get the equipment and materials quite easily.
Right, so if you need spare parts or replacements
or just supply and demand.
Right.
So you've got a ready supply. The other thing is efficiencies. Tier 1 panels are generally between 19 and 23%. So that means that you're getting the best out of your panel. There's many other panels on the market that are lower, but this is continually improving all the time.
All right. And so from your experience then, what type of businesses have you typically been installing solar panels for?
So there's a number of businesses that we've been installing on. Car dealerships are one. We've also do agricultural buildings, manufacturing and warehouses, offices, residential, mainly student flats. We've had a few contracts with student accommodation providers across the UK. And all the way down to horticultural and even greenhouses.
Earlier, you mentioned that part of your role is going out and sort of surveying these places before doing the installation. What are some of the first things that you look for when you go and visit these businesses to survey them?
So there's an initial survey done, desktop survey, normally by a salesman, which will give some indication of what I'm going to see before I get there.
So that's when they'll look in Google Maps.
They'll Google Maps
right,
and ask the consumer about anything that they should know, whether there's capacity in the boards, just so that we can hit the ground running when we turn up. One of the first things electrically that I'll look at is the type of supply, so earthing arrangement, and then room in plant rooms, especially in distribution boards, because a lot of businesses now, because everything's going to electric, they've had things added over the years. They weren't initially future-proofed.
So when you say a distribution board, is that what?
So a consumer unit.
Fuse box.
Well,
basically.
on a large scale.
Right.
So in a 3-phase application, say in a large commercial building, there'll be a distribution board that may have breakers up to 160 amps and upwards.
You hear that a lot, like first phase, second phase, and third phase. Could you just give our listeners and viewers a bit of a explanation as to what that?
So single phase is your electricity supply that will be coming into, say, a residential house or a small building that might be commercial, say like a pub, or something similar. Anything that starts to go over that size will need 3-phase really, because you reach the capacity of that supply, of the fuse effectively, and the cable that comes in. That's when you think about upgrade work. So any building that is of a certain size will be 3-phase.
Right, generally. Okay. So that goes, so the domestic is more the single phase.
Yeah, say like a mansion, they could be 3-phase, because you see it more and more with certain houses that aren't even that big, but if they want 2 EV chargers or they've got a heat pump or something else, they need to balance these loads across phases in order to have all these different applications in their house.
And is the phasing to do with timing or just like how the power is distributed or?
3 phase is effectively, it's a waveform. One phase will be taken at one point of the wave, and then the second phase will be taken at another point of the wave.
Right.
And then the third phase will be at another point of the wave. These will all be balanced. So effectively, it's giving you 3 inputs into your property or building.
And that just makes it like safer and more stable and reliable, is it?
It just gives you more power. So a typical 3-phase install will mean that you'll have 100 amps times 3.
Right.
So effectively, think of it as almost like 3 houses worth of electricity running side by side that you can then use at your will. The only criteria is that you need to basically balance those phases so that the electricity works efficiently within the property.
So when you visit a business then, to sort of backtrack a little bit, you sort of check out that side of things. Are you also checking the size of the roof or how many solar panels that might be needed? What other things are you looking for when you visit a business?
So when you're looking at roofs, there's a lot to look at. Obviously, there's orientation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's pointing. So obviously, south is best, but then east-west also works just as well because you get a longer period of generation from morning to evening, obviously with the sun following east to west. Going on a north roof, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Some customers want it because their south roof might be full.
Yeah.
And they think, why not? We've got the money. We'll get the money back eventually. If we're going to be here long term, it's still a good idea. Other things to note are the pitch. So over a certain pitch, you can't actually install solar panel mounting systems. They have varying tolerances.
So when you work with a business then, how long does that kind of installation take from, going to sort of survey them, deciding that it's suitable and then getting them installed on the roof of their business?
So if it was a straightforward install with everything in place and sort of bread and butter for us, you could be on site within 4 weeks. We normally say as a rule of thumb, if everything is easy, as per se, you're looking at about 50 kilowatt a week. So a 200 kilowatt install could take us a month.
Right.
To complete.
And with that in mind then, what are the sort of common blockers or challenges a business might face in getting solar panels over? So it sounds like if it's going to take a month, does that require a lot of like planning and permission and so forth?
One of the main stumbling blocks is the DNO application, which is the District Network Operator.
Right.
So that's Western Power or SSE, whoever your local provider is of the national grid. You have to send off an application for what you proposed. They then bounce it back and say whether you're actually allowed to install what you proposed. Worst case scenario is they could say no, or they'll say that you'll be export limited.
Right.
Which is effectively, you can use that power in-house, but once it gets to a certain threshold, so say you had a 200 kilowatt system on your roof, you may have 50 kilowatt export limit. So if you're using a certain amount of energy and then it starts to go over 50 kilowatt trying to go to the grid, it will curtail the inverters and stop that export happening.
Okay. And so one of the reasons why the DNO might say no, would that be because the project was too big or the capacity of the...
So generally the issue is the infrastructure. As we know, the grid it's pretty old in some certain places, especially rural locations. We do have a lot of problems with, say, agricultural buildings, because a farm could be at the end of a power line.
Yeah.
So it has a transformer and it could be the last on that transformer.
Right.
That transformer might not have been upgraded for 40 years.
Really?
Say. So the DNO could go back and say that until that infrastructure is upgraded, we'll give you permission to install it, but you won't actually be able to export anything. Now, we have had that on a number of occasions. And for some farmers, say that is actually not appealing because they'd be looking at their SEG payment.
Yes, there's Smart Export Guarantee. Yeah.
And they might be factoring that payment into their return on investment. In agricultural settings, it's a lot more appealing because they are entitled to better SEG payments than, say, your average consumer.
Oh, right.
And so, because I think consumer, like if you go with some suppliers offer like 15p per kilowatt hour or something, isn't it? Or,
yeah.
And so for commercial businesses, that say payment is more than that in some instances?
It all depends on who your provider is
Yeah.
and when you negotiated your deal.
Right.
So a lot of people come in to negotiate a new deal now, might be worse off than what they were on before.
Right. So is that the direction of traffic? Is that they're getting less money for the electricity they're exporting?
Sometimes, but you can also buy electricity in from one supplier
Yeah.
and then export to a different supplier.
Right.
So that's the route a lot of people go down. So then they renegotiate who they're buying it off and who they're selling it back to.
So I guess if you're a business with a lot of consumption, if you're in heavy industry or something like that, then you could be looking at quite a considerable saving then on your energy bills through having solar panels and through SCG as well.
Yes, yeah, most definitely.
So you're taking from both.
It's both aspects, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So if a business is considering getting solar panels for their building, do they have to take care of the kind of scaffolding or access, or is that handled by yourself?
So we don't actually do it in-house, but we have a trusted contractor that we've used for a number of years who will travel anywhere in the UK pretty much for us and knows our specific needs. The scaffolding can be a considerable cost depending on your building, but say like a commercial building, a lot of the time it may just be edge protection. So that means no actual scaffolding going to the floor.
Right.
But you may have a tower in order to access the roof and also load materials, so a loading bay.
With that in mind then, are there types of businesses that are maybe just not suitable for having solar panels for those reasons, but also because of like the type of roof they've got or the angle or position?
Yeah, it's sometimes down to the consumer that when we go back with a revised quote, so the desktop quote might seem quite appealing, but then we go back and we say, actually, it will only be this much, or the DNO come back and it's not quite what they expected. That might be where it falls down. Doesn't happen very often. Asbestos is a big problem.
Right.
There's still a lot of roofs out there that are completely asbestos.
I guess particularly industrial
Buildings that have been touched for years.
Yeah.
And there are safe ways to fit to asbestos roofs.
Right.
But it involves a lot of extra work for the operatives, wearing certain safety equipment, stopping debris falling into the building. Sometimes the roof actually might not be of good enough structure, might be fragile, but no one knows until we get there, or it needs strengthening in some way, which might mean a complete re-roof.
Would there ever be an instance then where you would not recommend them getting solar panels, or would you recommend those extra processes of like, we can install the solar panels, but we need to do X, Y, Z first?
So if we have any doubt about the roof structure, we will then have a structural assessment done. That'll be part of the costing. And we will go back to the client and then say, these are your options. Sometimes we can do the strengthening ourselves. A lot of agricultural buildings, for example, have only been designed for that roof.
Right.
That's actually on top and nothing else put on top.
Yeah.
We can actually strengthen the roof with timbers and then fit to the roof with panels. But in, say, an older building that, again, has only been designed for that roof, it might be a metal structure, and that's something we wouldn't touch, but we could advise what needs to be done and then go back to the client with a cost.
And then you've alluded to it a little bit throughout the episode, but could you give an example of a project that you've worked on recently and kind of seen from start to finish?
So one that comes to mind is TC Harrison Ford, which is up in Derby at Pride Park. That was a 200 kilowatt roof mounted system.
This is a Ford dealership.
Ford dealership. Straightforward enough on the roof install because it's a trapezoidal roof, which basically means it's made up of ridges. When you fit a solar panel to that type of roof, it's just one fixing and then a clip that then clips the solar panel to it. So relatively easy to install roof-wise.
Yeah.
So that gives a good turnaround on the install time and obviously less cost for the customer. But we did encounter a few problems with the electrics. As I mentioned earlier on about future-proofing, this building was built in late 90s, early 2000s. The plant room had capacity on the supply, but not on the board. Because what you find is the board would only match the supply, when really, in order to future-proof it, the board needs to be larger than the supply, so that then you can inject power into it from solar panels.
Right.
Because otherwise you may actually overload the board and create something called hotspots within the board because the supply characteristics basically have been breached. So to get around this, we then installed a main switch that connected in before this board, installed a new board in the workshop, and refed some compressors that were fed from the original plant room off that.
And so did this add like additional cost to the project, or?
It did add additional cost, but it's something that was brought up right at the inception. It just meant that there was extra time, extra materials, but all in all, it still didn't impact it too much. The only thing that was a problem with that type of install and environment is that you're working in a busy showroom and workshop. So then we had to do things out of hours. So running cables through a building in a ceiling is not something you can do with people going to the toilet and whatever else. So that was after hours. And again, for the power down, when we actually turn everything off, that would be the same.
So were there like just nights when you just had to turn everything off?
That job was done mainly in the week. It's always advisable when you're doing any power downs in a business to also have IT on site to make sure everything turns back on.
Right.
Because it's not great if that happens and Monday morning comes round and nobody knows.
Can you just talk us through some of the most common questions that you get asked by particularly businesses about solar panels, or maybe some of the objections that people have, or some of the barriers that they have when it's coming to getting on site and talking about their projects?
So one that comes to mind at the moment is we're doing a job for a client that doesn't own the premises. So it's a landlord-owned premises. They subjected a proposal to their landlord, but then their landlord got a environmental consultant in who looked at our renewable proposal and then decided that things weren't up to scratch. One of the things was that they wanted to use solar edge equipment. So solar edge equipment is a optimized panel, which is installed on your roof, which the main selling point is from an insurer is that if the inverter turns off, the DC power stops flowing from the panel, so reduces the risk to firefighters or anyone who may be in that building if there was a fault or a problem within the building.
Yeah.
So that was something that came up recently. Glint and glare is another one. If you're
That's for neighbouring properties, I think.
Yes, and also if you're under a flight path near an airport, if you have low-flying planes, they'll do a feasibility study on whether that would impact someone trying to land a plane, or for neighbouring businesses who might be just across the road.
Lastly as well then, so you've been sort of working in the solar industry for the last 5 years or so. You've seen lots change in that time. Where do you see it going in the next 5 years from your perspective?
I can only see things getting better and more fruitful for installers, especially because people have really made this switch in their minds that it is a good thing, especially from a sustainability aspect, because people are not looking at it as just a capital cost. They're thinking about the savings not coming off their bottom line, but how can we reinvest this in our business to make us more sustainable? So other initiatives and things like that are really appealing to the end consumer. I do feel that the government have a massive part to play, especially putting pressure on the national grid and injecting more money into upgrades across the country, because it is becoming quite a stumbling block for installers and consumers alike.
So I think that's all we've got time for today, but Pádraig, you've been great. Thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right. Sure. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Pádraig.
If you have a question about solar panels, heat pumps, double glazing, EPC ratings, or even charging your EV at home, then get in touch with us and maybe we can discuss it next time on Positive Energy.
All you need to do is contact us via the EcoExpert social channels on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, or you can email us at info@theecoexperts.co.uk.
Please like and subscribe to Positive Energy wherever you're watching or listening, and we'll see you next time.